Welcome. Today we got Charis Mix. She's a military spouse, a Mission43 Leaders Fellow, PMP graduate, and just on the cusp of starting her brand new big adult career after spending some time as a quote-unquote stay-at-home mom and running things on the home front. She has a wealth of experience of building community and setting down roots in all different types of places, and we're going to talk about doing it here in Idaho. Welcome to the Mission43 Podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing the struggles and triumphs of transitioning to life after the military. I'm Dan Nelson. I'm a former Army Special Forces officer who's personally experienced the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. In every episode, we'll be sharing tips, strategies, and real-life stories of veterans and their families who've chosen Idaho for their life after the military. So join us, and let's start the conversation. Charis Mix. Of all the guests of Mission43's podcast, you have the coolest name, just so you know. You sound have you had a long DJ career or no?
No, pretty short-lived. Not a lot of success there, so I moved on pretty quickly.
Well, thank you for being here, and I know you're a new Idahoan, relatively, right? Like you're getting to be an Idahoan. You're wearing a Carhartt jacket now, so that's really more than half the battle.
Trying to fit in, yes.
Right. But you're also a part of Cohort 6 of the Leaders Fellowship. And I'm curious because you were the first person. We have 131 total fellows throughout the 6 cohorts, including yours. And you were the only one when I made the phone call and said, congratulations, through the interview process, you made it, you're selected. And I was expecting something different than what I got, because what I got was, oh, thanks. Can I have some time to think about it? It reminded me of high school where it's like, hey, I love you. And they're like, thank you.
Yeah, let me get back to you on that.
Yeah. Can you talk to me about, or tell us a little bit about why were you hesitant to do the Leaders Fellowship?
I guess the backstory on that is it took me a while to work up the courage to even apply. Last spring, so about this time last year, I'd found out that my son had gotten a spot in full-time daycare. So both my kids were going to be in childcare finally. And then I had the chance to go back to work. Mm-hmm. I was really excited about that. But it had been a couple years since I had been out of the workforce, and I was nervous about that. And as I was processing this with my husband, he had a conversation with Tony Lyles, who had been part of the fellowship and the Leaders Program. And he's like, oh, Charis should check out the Leaders Fellowship. It's perfect for people transitioning to a new season of life, especially when they're trying to, restart their career. So Jesse came home, told me about it. And I kind of fell into what has been kind of my gut reaction to a lot of military family services. Is no, that was your thing. Yeah. This is totally different. I don't need that or want that, or I'm not sure I would fit into that. And then also, to be honest, there was the component of it that involved backpacking for
Phase 2.
Yes, 3 nights, 4 days. And I've been camping and backpacking a decent amount, but never for that duration.
Probably not with a bunch of relative strangers either.
Yes. Yeah. So that part was a little bit daunting.
Sure.
And I'm not an extreme personality. So in my mind, there's so many great veterans who know how to scale rock walls and have been backpacking, in the Arctic, or these very amazing feats. I don't have that on my resume. And so I was like, okay, how am I going to keep up with everybody? And so I told myself, I kind of made a deal with God. I was like, I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other. And if doors keep opening, I'll lean into this. So the first part was checking when the deadline for the application was, and there was still a week.
Oh, great!
Yeah,
all right.
So I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply. I'd also talked to Tony one-on-one about it, and he was just so encouraging and so effusive about how transformative it was for him.
Tony Lyles is one of our greatest advocates out there in the community.
Yeah, he's just very genuine about his enthusiasm, and I think his desire to see good for people and to see people grow. It was hard to say no to Tony as well. So I told Tony, I'll apply, let's see what happens. I got the interview, and I was like, okay, I'll do the interview, see what happens. And I got the call from you, and I was like, oh, this was a moment where I had to make a decision. And so the first thing I did was just put the brakes on. I was like, okay, I need to sleep on this before I commit.
You asked for a couple days, if I recall. You're like, can I have a couple days to think about it? And I was like, oh, sure. Yeah. But then I started talking to you and I'm like, you belong here. I don't know if you remember me saying that, but like you knocked our socks off in so many different ways through the application process, through the interview process. And it is really competitive. You know what I mean? Like it really has gotten that way. Thank God I was in cohort 1 before it was like competitive. They're taking anybody. But now it's gotten to be like really, a highly sought after deal for at least our local military spouse community. And you still like blew us away. And that's why it was so shocking to see like even somebody with all this objective success and all this objective intelligence and everything can still have a moment of like, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or self-doubt.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to summarize it. I feel like when you retell it like that, I didn't mean it personally that I didn't want to get involved. It was just like, total nerves. And I think it just kind of made very real the fact that I was entering a new season of life, and that I was going to have to be uncomfortable to figure out, like, where am I now as a parent, as a professional? Let's see, at that point Jesse had been out of active duty, I think almost 3 or 4 years. But there's just still a lot of transition in our life. We had, kind of relatively recently moved to Idaho, like you said. And so I think the fellowship represented like this pivotal turning point. I was like, okay, yeah, we're like stepping into a new season. And I was going to do it with a bunch of strangers, with an organization I was kind of familiar with, and mostly going on just like the enthusiasm of good friends and your encouragement. I think I've shared this before, but Mission43, like the more time I spent with people in the organization and learning more about the programs that you offered, it was the first time as a spouse I had felt like someone was taking my intellectual and physical capacity seriously. I think it just recognized like how much spouses have innately in terms of strength and intelligence, but also like we are going to push you to can meet that potential and exceed it, and you're going to do it with others, and you're going to do it with service members, which I think like the integration of that and people who are also both veterans and spouses, I really appreciated that kind of like blended community where there wasn't like a huge distinction in like how you served or how you were a part of the military.
Spouses aren't an afterthought.
Yes.
It's not like, oh yeah, and you guys can come along too. Like you were a huge part of this, you being the collective military spouse community here. You think about like your experience in the fellowship so far, and you're not even done, right? Like we still have a few more sessions. But I remember when we first were talking too, it seemed like you were, because your kids are still young, but a year and a half ago they were even younger, and you were like, I don't know, like where my life has taken me type of feel. Like you've been out, like you said, out of the workforce for a little bit, and since then, like you've been through Leaders Fellowship, you've gotten your PMP certificate, right?
Yes, yeah.
Through Mission43's PMP program, but you still, like, you did all the work yourself and you crushed it. And aren't you about to start, like, a brand new career here?
Yes. Actually really excited about that. It took a little bit longer than I thought it would. That was humbling.
Why? Like, because you're being really picky about what you want type of thing? Or is it actually challenges that a lot of military spouses have in like trying to explain a break in employment, or what is it?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. I think it's a number of factors. I mean, some of it has to do with timing and the economy. Like things have been in flux for a little while now, so I think employers were kind of unsure about their kind of hiring goals. Some of it is also I was picky this time around. I think in the past I've cast a pretty broad net on like the jobs that I was applying to, and this time I decided, I don't want a remote job. I want something that it's like based here in the city and where I could leave my house after being home for a couple years,
Very
go
important.
to an office. That was important to me. I think it's good for my mental health, but and also there was like a specific role and industry that I wanted to work in, and I think because now having kids, I knew that work was going to add to our life, but it was also going to put a certain amount of pressure on time and energy and resources in a way that I wanted to make sure I was doing what was good for my family and good for me and meant something to me. So yes, I was being more picky. I did also, though, do a lot of applications, a lot of interviews, a lot of networking. You know, I kind of did all the things, and it just still took time. Mm-hmm. I think some of it had to do with, I just kind of believe in God directing my time and my opportunities, and mm-hmm. He just decided when that was, when it was time. So I start next week, Tuesday.
Oh my gosh!
And
what is the role?
So I'm going to be a marketing coordinator at a structural engineering firm called KPFF.
Very cool.
So they have kind of a national presence and brand, but they've got a local Boise office that manages their Mountain West region. And the team there seems really amazing. I'm excited.
I'm trying to think, and you're certainly not alone in this, but you came to Mission43 referred by a former Leaders Fellow, you and your husband both, but you weren't incredibly involved with Mission43 programming. And kind of your first dip of the toe / both feet jumping in the lake over your head was the Leaders Fellowship. And then you used the education pillar for its project management professional, PMP cert. I think you used some of our employment pillar and working with Zach and Nick and trying to navigate all these things. Like, are you now referring other people to this organization, or is it something that you're still, still learning about?
No, I've definitely been referring folks. I think the Hire Heroes program and the team at Mission43 in terms of employment opportunities. Mm-hmm. I'm super excited to tell friends about that, both service members and their spouses. I used to think, when I struggled with figuring out what I was going to do with my career, it was a matter of me just taking some time to be quiet and to focus and make a decision and move forward, and then just be, really hardworking about it, which some of that is true. But the Leaders Fellowship, I think in particular, or just Mission43 in general, I was like, man, the team approach to so many of life's big transitions and challenges, I think for me, that's been the way to go this round for sure. And so we know a lot of folks who are moving to Idaho or are stationed at Mountain Home mm-hmm. and want to get a little bit more plugged into the Boise area. Definitely been recommending Mission43. They've got the spouse enrichment program that's going this year that Kelly's running, and that's been awesome. So I've brought a friend to that who's new to the area and trying to figure out what she's going to do for work, and also just recruiting people to the Leaders Fellowship anytime I can. Yeah,
well, you must have done a heck of a job, because now we're right in the middle of this application period for cohort 7.
Okay. Yeah.
And it is wild to see the number and amount and the quality of applicants. It's going to be a very hard selection year for sure. But what for you was what surprised you most about the Leaders Fellowship experience? Is it what you were expecting? Is there a particular phase that kind of was different than you thought?
So I'm a pretty introverted personality and individual. And so phase 1 was show up, get in a van for 2-3 hours with people you don't know, and then spend 2-3 days with people you don't know.
Get in the van.
Yeah, exactly. That was probably the most anxious about that, because that was just rip the Band-Aid off. Here we go. Yeah. And I was surprised, I think, how much fun I had. It was a really great balance of structured activity. So again, when I needed a little bit of time to warm up, there was, we had speakers, we had different workshops, and then there was also time, especially in the mornings, where I'd go for a walk by myself. That was the first time, I think the longest I'd been away from my kids since they were born.
That's not a small deal.
And I got my own hotel room, and it was beautiful, and it was quiet. And I remember just laying on the bed being like, okay, I'm going to wait till the very last moment to go to breakfast, because this is amazing.
Nice.
So that was a gift in and of itself. But yeah, then we did the obstacle course and a couple more physical activities. And I know that there existed a range of physical ability in the group. Mm-hmm. So there's some people that are doing ultra marathons, and some people that are working through injuries, or just, not as extreme in that way. And it just felt really nice that there was that variety, and that I could kind of slot in different activities, meet different people. And so yeah, I think the community was much more diverse than I expected. And that was really, that was really fun.
And what about your small group experience? Because I know at the end of phase 1, basically you kind of get put into your small group that you're with for the rest of the cohort. In particular, again, being shoved in a van.
Yes.
Later on in late August this year, we did it, or this past year, and you guys went up to. Well, where did you go? We had a lot of changes here at the last second because of all the wildfires.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I forgot about that. That's right. We went up into, I guess, the White Cloud mountain range area, and we had two. Oh, sorry. We had two leaders who were part of previous cohorts, and I remember within like the first day, because I was still kind of getting to know the folks in my cohort well. I was like, Dan and the group did a really thoughtful job of putting us together. You were sort of like discovering the commonalities that I think you guys sort of assumed that we might have, or ways that we could mutually encourage each other, or just the kind of varying skill sets that came together in a really cohesive way.
We psychologically profile all of you.
Yeah. I mean, there definitely was like that thoughtfulness. I was like, that was like another thing about the program where I know that everyone on the leadership team is incredibly busy, but I have been really impressed by your intention in getting to know people, their families, their names, their challenges, and then connecting them with other people who I think can be just very mutually supportive in that, or mutually encouraging. And so I found that in my small group. They're just really kind, but really thoughtful group who I just cracked up like half the time. It was just, for being outdoors for that long, like backpacking, sleeping on the ground, like that was already pushing myself, and I knew I'd be uncomfortable. But doing it with that crew was really rewarding. And that environment just really allows for deep conversations very quickly.
It does.
And it's really valuable.
And I think, it's not just like the physical aspect of it too. It really is getting into, the readings that you're giving up there that are meant to spark discussion and thought. We definitely encourage people to have periods of solitude as well.
Yeah.
Like, you said phase 1 was the first time you'd been away, the longest you'd been away from your kids at that point, your young kids. What was phase 2 like, where you'd like no phone service, no anything?
Yeah.
Was that a weird feeling for you?
It was. I'm so used to constantly keeping tabs on little people and a lot of responsibilities.
The mom life.
Yeah. So to be kind of like released from that is a little unnerving, because I had to find my footing again. I do remember, people often talk about, especially like the first night camping is really uncomfortable because you're kind of getting used to it, the sounds, the ground, the new routine. And I was like, that was like one of the best nights of sleep I had. I was like, that's why I woke up a couple times, because it was cold, but I could go right back to sleep. No one was screaming.
That's awesome.
And I definitely missed my family for sure. But it was also a reminder of who I was as an individual, who I was as my own person before I became a mother, and gave a lot of time to think about how those two parts of me can integrate moving forward in a way that really honors my responsibilities and the people that mean the most to me. And
well, I specifically did not go with your group, because then you would hear me waking up screaming in the middle of the night, and I do need some cuddling. So
sorry, Dad, you got to get your own water. Yeah,
it's weird. The group is always cursed with my presence, but that's okay. What I guess after that experience, it seems like you came. I don't know. It seems like you have a different level of closeness with your small group, and then maybe just a different type of bond with everybody else in the entire cohort as well. Is that something that like we as the team members here, like, are we just kind of fictionalizing that and hoping that it happens, or do you actually feel like you've made some close relationships with the folks that you're in this experience with?
Yeah, I think that does happen, and that has happened for me. And honestly, not just in my small group in my cohort, but across the cohorts as well. That's true. So I've done the PMP class, some of the workouts with Anna, and the spouse enrichment series. And so there's just been a lot of ways I've been meeting people. And there's been a couple of folks in particular. So actually one example is Beth Sumner. When I was considering whether or not I was going to apply and then accept the leadership program, I had watched an episode of this podcast, and Beth was on it, and she was talking about motherhood and kind of her struggles with changes in career and life trajectory, like in the service, out of the service. And there was just a lot. I don't know. There was something about, I was like, I feel like I want to talk to her. I want to hear her perspective on her experience. So I think I asked you, I was like, hey, she seems great. Is it cool if I just get her number and see if she'd like to grab coffee and talk about her life? And And she was so kind and generous with her time, and like immediately set up a time to grab coffee, went for a long walk, and talked about the fellowship, but also just her life experience. And since then, we've like met up every couple of months. She's been great about, just sharing her thoughts on being a working mom and what it's like to, I don't know, several times in your adult life, refigure out what you're going to do next and who you are in that season.
Are you telling me it's not just a one and done?
As it turns out, my 16-year-old self thought, like at some point, I just like figure out my life as an adult, and then it's like smooth sailing until forever. And I'm like, super cool, and I've got it all down and figured out.
Well, I have not found that point yet. I'm not sure. But if you ever do, let me know how to get there, okay?
Yeah, I'll keep you posted.
All right. Well, I'm curious to... You guys are like kind of living what Mission 43 is hopeful for. You know, a large part of it is like military families choosing Idaho for like their life after the military. And even though your husband's still in the Guard, left after duty, but I mean, it is like, hopefully you're going to be here for a while.
Yeah.
What's been the hardest part then for like the families out there, the military spouses out there that are like, I'm not sure, you know, Idaho's the right place, or if there's going to be challenges. What was the hardest part about being new to Idaho for you guys?
I mean, I'll say this. I moved around a lot as a kid. My family, my parents were not in the military, but just for various job opportunities and things that came up. I remember I counted. I had gone to 9 schools by the time I finished high school.
Oh, really?
And then in my adult life through college, and then marrying Jesse and being in the military, moved a couple more times. And so I am very accustomed like picking up and moving and being new and figuring out, you know, how to get your bearings. And
as an introvert too, you seem to successfully navigate that repeatedly.
I try. Yeah, I've had a lot of practice. And I remember when Jesse decided, okay, he's going to get out of active duty and we're going to settle down somewhere. At first I was really excited because like, this is what I was looking for. Like, I just want the dust to settle and I want to put some roots down. And I mean, some of the challenges were we moved here in 2020.
Did something happen?
I don't know. It was a weird whirlwind of a year.
Oh my gosh, what a time to join a new community.
Yes. Yeah. We had decided to move there shortly before COVID hit, and so we just had this vision of what it was going to be like, and then just kind of got like, you know, gut punched with the reality of it, which was like much more isolated, a lot quieter than we thought, to say the least. And so maybe, so, you know, that was an odd beginning to this chapter. And then I think the reality of like, okay, we're really putting roots down. Like that was what I was not experienced in, was like, how do you invest in a community for the long term? And I think a lot of military families, you do kind of build that muscle of how to change, transition, expect the unknown, be ready to kind of like pivot on a dime. But the idea of like, what do I do when I've decided I'm going to be here for like 10, 15, 20 years? What does that look like? So like choosing your neighborhood, you know, or like where you're going to live is a little more consequential. You're thinking about like, I don't know. I was suddenly thinking about schools, you know,
right.
Like, before kids, I didn't know anything about school districts. And now I was like, oh, where are the good schools? And, you know, what parks are in walking distance? And even settling into a church, church has always been an important part of my life to find that community, but it's always been like, okay, like this is good for now for a couple of years, you know, jump in and out of groups. But now I was like, what's a church that I wanted to be a part of, like growing and families that we wanted to build bonds with for a long time, for our kids to grow up together.
You're not just a visitor at that point.
Yeah.
You're like a stakeholder.
Yes. And I think Idaho, I guess right now it's quite a mix of people who have been here for generations and then kind of an influx of folks that came in, particularly around that same time in 2020. And I think it's been very humbling, the reality of like, man, I can kind of romantically say like, yes, I want to like invest in a community and put down roots. But the reality is like, I have done that before, and doing it with kids feels that much more consequential. And sometimes it involves, you know, like hanging in there in people and relationships and circumstances that are difficult. And I mean, certainly, I think like politics of the past few years have made community building sometimes difficult for a lot of people, like all over the country.
Yeah, I would agree.
And so it's like, I want to be a part of, I don't know, making relationships and friendships and those kind of relationships stronger for the long term. But how do I go about that?
I mean, I don't know, especially since your entire life, or at least your childhood, you're moving around so much. So what example did you have, like from your parents who are constantly, you know, moving around for the jobs and everything like that? Not that it's a bad thing, but it doesn't sound like you grew up with like a model of someone that's like, this is our community and we're going to be deeply involved in it. You know what I mean? And then I'm guessing, well, since your parents weren't military, you didn't have that experience, was becoming a military spouse and marrying Jesse, was that a shock to you, or was it just one of those things that you just kind of roll through and you're like, oh, here's the new life where I'm bouncing here and going there and adjusting with this and finding that?
I mean, I will say about my childhood, we did move around a lot, but my parents were, so my dad was a pastor and my mom was a counselor. And so they both kind of exemplified lives that were about investing in people.
Sure.
And I think they have always done a really wonderful job of being like, whoever, you know, comes into our life in this season, that we are intentional about those relationships and we're investing in those relationships and we take that seriously. But yeah, certainly.
Well, you did have that example then. I was wrong. I was thinking 9 schools that you might have been bouncing around. But yeah, you parents that are both oriented in service to other people and relationship building as a pastor and a counselor, right?
Yeah. That was I think that was really instructive for me.
Yeah.
Now, so then going into the military was really interesting because we didn't have a lot of friends and family who were active duty. Grandparents on both sides were in the military and they had served, but not too many in my parents' generation, and then none that were in my generation. So I wasn't familiar with a lot of the specific hardships. I had a lot of assumptions about the military. I knew generally it is hard to pick up and move all the time, but it didn't intimidate me. It didn't bother me so much. I had kind of, for a bunch of different reasons, growing up in different cultures, being biracial, growing up in different states, different countries, I didn't feel like one particular place was home or like a place that carried my identity. And so I think my parents also did a good job of just kind of like instilling that in just me. It's like, who are you grounded in yourself, who God made you to be, the relationships that you keep throughout the course of your lifetime. Like that was the most grounding element. But again, there's like additional challenges in the military. It's not just moving. It's like, oh man, so I've got a spouse who I love and I want to spend tons of time with, and they're gone a lot. And it's not like, oh, let me talk to my boss. Let me see if I can like come home early, or like, let me see if I can not do that work trip. It's like, I mean, his first deployment, it was like kind of those classic moments where he had just moved to Tucson. It was like a couple of months, maybe 2 or 3 months after being there. And I get the text. He's like, we have to talk.
Yep.
I was like, oh my gosh, like this is actually happening. And he like came home and it was like, he was gone in a week. First deployment, new to a city. And I was like, oh man, all the moving in the world doesn't prepare you to be left. I think maybe that's the most significant difference.
How did you deal with it?
There was crying involved, and that was tough. I wanted to kind of be this like stoic wife who like held down the fort, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss you a lot and I'm worried about you.
Did you guys have kids at that point?
We didn't, so it was just me.
So yeah, just you then.
Yeah.
And a new community, so.
Yeah, and my dog. We had a new dog. She kind of became my wing woman, and we had a church community that was pretty remarkable in their response to kind of the situation. So we were in Tucson, so there's the Air Force Base in town. And so they were used to military families and that kind of lifestyle. Sure. But I wasn't used to people just being willing to like jump into friendship and relationship and support so quickly. And that's what I needed. I still had barely gotten to know the folks at his squadron. And so I was a little bit more plugged in at church than I was on base. But it was just very much one day at a time where I was like, I got married. We've built this life for 2 people. And now I have to kind of go about it as one person. Not having kids made it easier, but it also meant that there was a little less like structure kind of holding things together at times. And
did it get easier? I'm always wondering, like, over time through deployments, like, did it get easier for you as the military spouse to handle and deal with deployments or just separations in general?
Yeah, a lot of TDYs.
Or does it always suck?
I don't know if it got easier. It's always hard. Like you enter into a partnership to share a life with that person. I did figure out a routine or how to switch routines. Maybe that's kind of like more what it is, and I think a lot of spouses can relate to. It's you learn how to do life when they're home and everybody's together, and then you very quickly, like overnight, have to switch gears into a different routine and kind of a different mindset.
And then we come back.
Yes, and then you like switch back again. And so I think maybe I got better at weathering the transitions a little bit smoother. Particularly coming back from deployment, there's always a period of time where you're just kind of like re-getting to know each other because you've both been through so much. I'm thankful for technology, and there's quite a bit more communication that there's been in the past. But there's a lot to learn about the other person, especially in the initial couple weeks. Like, where are you at? Where are we at? How do we like merge that until the next training trip or deployment? Yeah,
I think just lack of communication is always a benefit I found. Just don't talk that much. Just make assumptions and then
keep the mystery alive. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see how that worked out for me really well. But I think at what point did you guys actually decide, we start having kids? Was that a factor in like maybe active duty, maybe we need to transition? Or was that something that didn't play into that?
It was before we had kids. For me, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do like the 20 years in the military with kids. We had kind of gotten to that point, sort of like right before like that halfway point.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, I'd like to have kids. We should start trying for kids soon. Yeah. And I wanted to know before we started, even that was like, are we going to do this in the military? Or we're not going to, do this in active duty or are we not?
Yeah.
And, we went back and forth on that decision. That was not like a comfortable conversation. That was not a quick conversation.
It never is, but it's very common for people at usually that midway point of the career. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's very common. I think everyone can remember a time where they have that conversation of like, are we going to keep doing this or do we need to focus on X or Y?
Yeah. I think in any like partnership like that, you're agreeing to kind of compromise in the vision for just yourself.
Oh, so the compromise word again. All right.
I know. I don't have any great answers, but I do know from my experience, it was like, okay, so I had this idea of my career and where I like wanted to be in the next 10 years. Jesse had this idea for his career. And I think, I understood there would be some challenges to that in the military when someone else is telling you like where to live or what your life schedule is looking like. But I was like, I'll make it work. I'll figure it out. I can work remotely, like all these things. I can adapt really well. I've moved around a lot. It's fine. But as time went on, it was like, I think the reality of like, okay, I really have to change what I thought my life was going to be. And I think for a long time, honestly, I held some like anger about like frustration, resentment, not necessarily like at Jesse's specifically. It was just like at the situation, I was like, oh my gosh, like, that didn't go as planned. That didn't go as planned. I have to like, change jobs again. It was hard to get momentum in community or career.
Did you ever plan like in previously as your young adulthood, childhood, did you ever see yourself as a stay-at-home mom, for lack of a better term?
No, that was also part. I was like, that was not part of the plan as well. Right. I wanted to have kids, but I also wanted to work. And my mom had done both, and I'd seen both modeled, and I was like, okay, I think I'd like to be working. We'll figure out, what to do for childcare and all of that. And anyway, like as time goes on, and at this point where Jesse and I were trying to decide if he was going to stay active duty, it was like there were parts of me that I was missing and parts of my dream for myself. Like, was there a way that can come to the forefront a little bit more in this next, decade of life?
It takes a lot of bravery to be able to voice that, though, and communicate that appropriately.
Sometimes I did it gently. Sometimes I think I did it out of frustration. And Jesse was always great in listening to that, but then also being like, this is what I want to do in the military. And the Guard was kind of kind of way to meet halfway. So it's like he's still involved in the work that he was really proud of and that he was really great at, but it gave a little more space to what I wanted to do. And then also the opportunity to be stationary for a while, which is what I had wanted for a family because I just moved around so much. Like, so
St. Jesse's making all of us look bad.
He is very human, very great. Our marriage is not perfect, but we're trying. We're trying.
You have this like different, everyone has their own flavors of community, right? And it sounds like obviously your faith and your church, no matter where you've been, whether it's Tucson or here in the Boise area, like you find that type of community. Have you ever had like a military spouse community before? You said like you weren't necessarily close to all the people in his squadron, different places on active duty. Like, yeah, I'm just curious. Like, is this something that's kind of new to you, being surrounded by weirdos that have the same similar experiences?
It kind of, yeah. I think there was a group in Tucson, a handful of girls. We came together in that first deployment that I was talking about. That was actually the one time I'd ever led a backpacking trip.
Oh, cool.
So we were all fairly new to it, and most of us had spouses who were really into it. We're like, no, we can do this on our own. We're going to do this too.
Oh, yeah.
I got us lost.
Yeah.
You know, there was some tension there for a while, but we recovered, and, you know, so just kind of like those adventures and misadventures we did together. We didn't have kids either, so it was just kind of like finding fun things to do to keep spirits up, to really enjoy this particular odd time in life.
Just do what I do. Just never admit to being lost.
Yeah.
Then you're never
just
lost.
Keep driving.
Piece of cake. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like that, very much like, oh, I think it's right here. We're almost there. And
totally
no
good.
one was speaking to me, you know, by the end of that.
How large was this group?
It was about 5 or 6 girls.
That's a lot of pressure. Well, even no matter who you're leading. It's a lot of pressure to get out there and put yourself out there like that. That's pretty cool.
I haven't done it since.
Oh.
But, you know, that was kind of a fun experience. But otherwise, I did keep some distance, I think. Not always intentionally. I just kind of had other things that I was interested in. But this idea of, I think part of it was like, okay, that was like Jesse's world, and I just have like other things and other places I wanted to be. I think if I'm being totally honest, I also was a little bit intimidated by some of the other spouses and families who were just so much more like experienced in the military life and so confident in their role in that. Mm-hmm. Just like rattling off acronyms and, we're very well connected on base and like memorize the whole rank structure.
I never even thought about that before, but it makes total sense.
I felt a little bit like, the new kid and just like not as cool or not as well versed in this whole world, and so I kind of shrunk away from that, which is unfortunate. I think that was kind of a missed opportunity to get to know some really amazing people.
You have this wealth of experience, like truly, and like you said, like you don't always talk openly about yourself that often, even throughout the fellowship experience and what I've seen. So this has been a really awesome thing for me to get, and I know somebody is watching out there that's like, or listening out there that is seeing a lot of their story in yours. Mm. If someone's out there that like maybe a military spouse or maybe just somebody on the fence because they feel that intimidation about jumping into Mission 43, whether it's a Leaders Fellowship or otherwise, like what would you tell them? Because I know Tony Lyles is the one that was badgering you, slightly different style than you. Yeah. If he's the Velvet Hammer, then you're, I don't know, just maybe the Velvet. But I'm curious of what you would say to somebody that's on the fence and thinking about it, but maybe is worried about not belonging.
I think there is a difference between like maybe like not feeling like you totally fit in and not belonging. I think Mission 43 has got an amazing hodgepodge of people, much more diverse in personality and experience than I expected. And even though I don't necessarily feel like I'm very much like everybody else, I think I am quieter, a little more introverted, a little bit more reserved. I have felt this sense of belonging. And so maybe that distinction of like, I'm not like everybody, or I'm not like a lot of the people I've never done an ultramarathon. I never will. I went to a couple of Anna's classes, and I remember I was like, I don't think I'm lifting like a third as much weight as everybody else. I was having a good time, but so things like that. I was like, I'm not quite like, some of the folks. But I've always felt so welcomed, and I've always felt like the things that I was excited about, interested in, especially advancing my career and kind of growing a little bit more like in the PMP program, there's just a lot offered there, and people are very curious about like what matters to you and what can we offer that lines up with that. And so I think if you're the type of person who's maybe resisted these kind of military-related organizations in the past, I think giving it a shot, giving it a chance with with an open heart, you will be quite surprised at where you find value, where you find relationships. And again, it may not be like, I love all the giant big group activities.
Right.
Or it's like maybe you're not career oriented and you're just looking for more friendships.
Yeah.
You don't have to commit to all of it. Sometimes it's just about finding one or two people that are really transformational. And Mission 43 just offers a great environment for that to happen.
Well, we have no place to take credit for your success. Certainly, I don't have any place to take credit for your success and your family's success here. But we're really proud of you to see this incredible development from being unsure about jumping into Leaders Fellowship a year and a half ago to being a critical member of it and helping others develop and come along. And now, going through all these programs and being successful in all these programs, like that doesn't happen without a lot of effort and a lot of talent, a lot of grit. And you've done all of that while still maintaining, your role as a spouse, as a mother, and as a productive member of this community. And I'm just super proud of you, super thankful for you and your family being here in Idaho, and extremely thankful that you're willing to share your story with us.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. You've been such encouragement to me. I think you saying that like I belong here, or that I should be here, or even giving me the chance to talk today, that means a lot. I think, like I said, the whole team has just been really amazing about how intentional they are getting to know people at a very like individual and personal level. And
I'm just waiting for you to figure out that you belong here way more than I do.
That might take me some time, but I appreciate it.
All right, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for joining us for the Mission43 Podcast. We hope you found it informative and helpful. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment below or email podcast@mission43.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date with new episodes. Be proud of your service, not defined by it. See you next time.